The history of football is written by giants, but few stood as tall or as quietly as Bob Paisley. To truly understand the man who turned Liverpool FC into an unstoppable scarlet machine, you have to travel back to the smoke, grit, and shadow of the coal heaps in Hetton Le Hole, a small colliery village in County Durham. Born on January 23, 1919, Bob entered a world defined by the rhythmic, heavy clang of industry and the fierce, unyielding solidarity of the working class. It was a time of massive social upheaval. On the very day he was born, 150,000 miners across the nation went on strike for a shorter working week. Young Bob learned early that life was a battle for every inch, watching his father, Sam, toil in the dark of the earth, while his mother, Emily, managed a household of 4 sons with a resilience that would become Bob's own trademark. In this community, coal was the lifeblood, but football was the religion. Paisley was a natural on the pitch, possessing a tactical brain even as a boy. However, the professional dream was nearly snuffed out before it began. He was rejected by his local club, Sunderland, because their scouts deemed him too small to make it in the professional game. It was a rejection that would haunt those scouts for decades. But for Paisley, it was simply the first of many hurdles to be cleared with quiet determination. He moved on to play for Bishop Auckland, the premier amateur team of the era. But before his professional career could truly ignite, the world changed. The roar of the crowds was replaced by the siren of war. In 1939, Paisley finally signed for Liverpool, but he wouldn't make a competitive debut for years. Instead, he became a soldier. He served as a desert rat in the 73rd Regiment of the Royal Artillery, fighting through the grueling campaigns of North Africa. He saw the horrors of war firsthand, but he also saw the value of strategy and calm under fire. He was part of the force that liberated Rome in 1944. Legend has it, he entered the ancient city on the back of a Liberator tanker, symbolic image for a man who would later conquer Rome 3 times as a manager. When the guns finally fell silent, Paisley returned to Anfield. He was no longer just a talented kid, he was a veteran. He made his official debut in January 1946, and by the end of that first post-war season, he had helped Liverpool secure their first league title in 24 years. Bob was a gritty, reliable left half the water carrier before the term existed. He provided the stability that allowed the flair players to shine. Yet, the game gave him a bitter lesson in 1950. After scoring in the FA Cup semi-final against rivals Everton to get Liverpool to the final, Paisley was dropped for the Wembley showpiece against Arsenal. He was devastated. He sat in the stands and watched his team lose 2-0. That moment of personal heartbreak taught him a cold professional truth. In football, sentiment must always come second to the needs of the team. It was a lesson he would later use to build an empire. Retiring from play in 1954, Paisley didn't leave the club. He simply changed his role. He became a self-taught physiotherapist, a role that revealed his hidden genius. Paisley had an almost supernatural eye for human movement. He famously claimed he could diagnose a player's injury just by watching them walk from their car to the training ground. He understood the mechanics of the human body as well as he understood the mechanics of a defensive line. This medical insight allowed Liverpool to maintain one of the lowest injury rates in the league for decades. When Bill Shankly arrived in 1959 to find a club languishing in the second division with a crumbling stadium, he found Paisley already there, working in the shadows. Shankly was the fire, the orator, the man who spoke to the masses and built the bastion of invincibility. Paisley was the ice, the quiet tactician who listened, observed, and adjusted the gears of the machine. Together with Joe Fagan and Reuben Bennett, they formed the boot room, a tiny windowless room filled with boots and crates of ale, where the greatest minds in football would dismantle opponents over mugs of tea. The partnership was the most successful in English history. Shankly grabbed the headlines, but Paisley provided the blueprints. Together, they dragged Liverpool into the light, winning 3 First Division titles and the club's first ever FA Cup. When Shankly unexpectedly retired in 1974, the city of Liverpool was in mourning. Fans couldn't imagine a world without their messiah. The board turned to the only man who truly understood the blueprint, the quiet man in the beige cardigan. Paisley was genuinely reluctant. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want the press conferences. He famously said he felt like he was stepping onto the bridge of the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. But Paisley didn't sink. He took Shankly's raw, emotional power and refined it into a clinical, European conquering force. His first season in 1974-75 was trophyless. leading some to wonder if the quiet man was up to the task. Paisley didn't argue. He simply went back to the boot room and analyzed the flaws. The following year, he won the league and the UEFA Cup. Then came 1977, the year Liverpool truly became the kings of the world. In the heat of Rome, Paisley led his team to a 3-1 victory over Borussia Mönchengladbach to claim their first European Cup. What made Paisley so lethal was his ruthlessness, masked by a humble, almost grandfatherly exterior. He was the quiet assassin. He could sell a club legend without a second thought if he felt their hunger was fading. He brought in a new generation of icons: Kenny Dalglish to replace Kevin Keegan, Graham Souness to provide the steel, and Alan Hansen to bring elegance to the defense. This spine would dominate English and European football for a decade. Under his 9-year reign as manager, Liverpool won an astonishing 20 major honours, including 6 league championships and 3 league cups. But it was his record of 3 European Cups in 5 years that truly separated him from every other manager on the planet. Paisley's management was a masterclass in less is more. He didn't believe in long, complicated team talks. He spoke in a fractured shorthand that the players called Paisley ease. He might say, "Go out there and do that thing with the ball like we talked about." And somehow, the players knew exactly what he meant. He prioritized the pass and moved philosophy simplicity at high speed. He ensured the team remained grounded, maintaining the boot-room tradition where egos were checked at the door. In 1983, at the absolute peak of his powers, Paisley decided it was time to step away. He wanted to go out while the team was still at the top. He handed the reins to Joe Fagan, ensuring the continuity of the Liverpool way. But Bob couldn't stay away from the game he loved. He became a director at the club and served as a vital mentor to Kenny Dalglish. When the legendary King Kenny became player manager in 1985, Paisley was the steady hand during the transition, helping Dalglish navigate the tactical complexities of the 1986 double. However, the final years of Bob Paisley's life were marked by a battle he couldn't win with a tactical adjustment. In the early 1990s, the man who had the sharpest mind in the sport began to lose his grip on the present. The first signs were small lapses in memory, but they grew more frequent. In 1992, he was officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. For a man whose entire life was built on observation, diagnosis, and memory, it was a particularly cruel fate. There is a story that breaks the heart of every Liverpool supporter. Bob, the man who had navigated the deserts of North Africa and the most complex stadiums in Europe, once struggled to find his way home from Anfield, a place he had walked into every day for 44 years. Bob Paisley passed away on February 14, 1996. At the age of 77, the footballing world fell silent for a man who had won everything but claimed nothing for himself. He was buried at St. Peter's Church in Walton, a simple grave for a man who never sought the trappings of celebrity. His beloved wife, Jessie, who had been his primary support through the war and the glory years, lived until 2012, reaching the age of 96. Today, when you visit Anfield, you see the Paisley Gateway. It is a massive, ornate monument to the man who won 20 trophies in 9 years. But Bob Paisley's true legacy isn't the gate, or the statues, or the naming of stands. His legacy is the standard of excellence. He set the idea that a club can be both a family and a ruthless winning machine. He was a son of the Durham coal mines who became the most decorated manager in English history. Yet he died as he lived, humble, quiet, and devoted to the Reds. He proved that you don't need to shout to be heard, and you don't need to be a giant to cast the longest shadow in the history of the game. Bob Paisley remains forever the quiet genius of football.